a way to talk about Buddhism in a different approach that is kind of like opening the circle of discussion. And what's the definition of enlightenment to you, what's the definition of like nirvana, and kind of like include everybody's experience in the circle. The center that we plan to build is called Padmakara, and is the name of this teacher. It's kind of like a root teacher of Vajrayana, and he. Some people call him by the name of Guru Rinpoche.
Okay.
Some people call him in the name of like Padma Sambhava. So he's the one who bring this tantric Buddhism from India and like reintroduced into like Tibet, which has like different contexts of culture, and then it's kind of like make the Buddhism like alive and like flourish again in a new era, and became the like Vajrayana or the tantric Buddhism.
Welcome to this new episode, and today I am here with Chanin. How are you?
I'm good.
Lovely. So Chanin is the owner of a restaurant in Koh Phangan. He's a gentleman from Bangkok who lived on the island for a long time, and also is part of a very interesting project that involves a center for a specific type of Buddhism, which is called Vajrayana Buddhism. Very good. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, what is your story in life?
Yeah, like you said, I'm from Bangkok and I grew up there. Spent like the first part of my life, study, and my family also like in Bangkok. So I graduated like university there, and then after that, it's feeling like okay, it's quite like a mega city that you've seen the world happening there, but still I feel like what's other part, like what's happening there, and like what do I want. So it's like struggling with all this question of like teenagers, and so I study journalism. My major in university is the filmmaking.
Wow, so cool.
And I don't know why, I was just kind of like, oh, it's pretty entertaining, it's kind of like you curious in like what's happening in the production, and seems like it involved like many aspects of art, and so it's kind of like, oh, interesting. So I studied that, but then at the end, coming to the real world, coming to the industry, it's like, wow, it's pretty hard work, and I feel like I'm not tough enough, and I don't have this like story that I feel like, oh, I'm gonna invest my life into telling this story. I'm like, I don't know what story worth telling, So it's kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna live life first, and then have some experience, and then think about it later. So I've starting to find ways to get out of Bangkok, and it's like, okay, what comes first? Just like universe, just give me something. At that time, I don't talk to the universe yet. But I was just kind of like, okay, I'm like looking for something to do, and then I got a scholarship to go to China for a year. I was like, how come? Like China just, okay. But, okay, good. Scholarship is good. It's a good start. So go to study in China for a year just to find out that I'm not going to do anything here. But it's interesting, you kind of like, you go and you learning new language, you meeting new community, going to the new country, which I also like, okay, I have my like part, like, my ancestor came from China. So it's good to kind of like going back to your roots a little bit, and maybe find like a trace to go back to like this Chinese in me. Because when I grow up, I in this middle class Chinese, like Bangkok Thai family, is like struggling a little bit of being Chinese. It's like, why you have to come together so often? Like, you know, family, and like you talk so loud and you don't look cool, you don't look like, you know, like Western culture, they're all more like civilized and like proper and stuff, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, like this feeling inside of like not accepting who I am, like when I was young. But yeah, so it's kind of like start to see it more like clearly when I started to reflect and looking back. So I went to China and then came back to Thailand, and then I got into like a social work, kind of like NGO stuff relating to, it's called civic education. It's kind of like a prep Thai society people to be more like a citizenship. You know, you living in the city, you know your rights, you how to say, because in that moment in Thailand it was quite a political tension. You know, it's divided and into like red shirt and into the yellow shirt. It's like a conservative versus like liberal, but it's still like super politics. And is on the verge of like repeating this like bloodshed, like massacre, like history again. And so that became like this project of like civic education. You could like think differently, but please don't kill each other, something like that. And the project was kind of like 10, 20 years, and I'm just kind of like going to a different meeting and writing proposal and recording the meeting, and it was just like I got a headache, and like I don't think like I don't feel any change. I don't feel like okay anybody learning anything, and I don't know that I could handle 10 years project. So after 1 year, I feel like this is probably not for me. I'm burning out, and I'm feeling lost a little bit. And so it turned out that I saw this retreat coming, and the retreat is focused on like social worker, like young social worker. Which I feel like, oh, this is me. This is for me. It's gonna be my first retreat ever. I don't know what it is, but like, okay, I'm signing up for that. And then I met this teacher friend who will involve in the story later. He just came back from the US, and he's a Thai guy with long hair, kind of look like hippie-ish a little bit. And he's starting to teach like meditation. It's like, interesting. And it's kind of like a way to talk about Buddhism in a different approach that is kind of like opening the circle of discussion. And what's the definition of enlightenment to you? What's the definition of like nirvana? And kind of like include everybody's experience in the circle, not just like I'm a oldest monk here, I tell you what is right and what is wrong, which is kind of like, you know, the foundation of Thai like society a little bit. You know, if you have a higher rank, like you're older, you're a monk, your, you know, social status, and you got a saying, like you got more space to kind of like talk. And but this is kind of like shifting the way you learn about everything. So I'm like, oh, after the retreat is done, I feel like I'm curious more about this thing. How is it called? And during that time, there's a movement. It's kind of like a contemplative like education. It's kind of a different way of how to say, education and study. By you have a facilitator, not like the teacher or the leader of the group like lecturing you. But you kind of like designing the process, and then have people involved, and then have people share and reflect on their direct experience. So it's kind of like drawn me. So I hop into a like different workshop like in Bangkok and around, and I went to different retreats in different temples, like the forest monk thing, like you know, like Theravada, like the old school one here, which you've seen a lot everywhere, like Vipassana and Goenka,
Yeah.
Plum Village, you know, like Zen, and like I just hop over, become a volunteer, helping them with the retreat, and then starting to meet like same age people like who is Thai and also like have this inspiration of kind of like want to do practice and kind of like want to have their spiritual like community along with like moving through life. And but during the time I think we still in the exploration mode. So I end up like in search, and then I end up in the organic farm in Chiang Mai.
Okay.
At the beginning, it because of the one of the retreat was happening there.
Okay.
So I went there to join, and then I found out that it's like, oh, it's a very interesting project as well. They're saving this indigenous seed, and because like seed is kind of like a treasure that's been passed on by your ancestor. They keep selecting like, oh, this mango is good, this fruit is good. You keep the tree and you keep this indigenous seed, and it's free, and then you pass it on to your neighbor, and it's kind of like, it's not dominated by like, you know, corporate, and then it's like selling you this seed is best, but you need to kind of like put this chemical into it, so it's kind of like go well together. It's kind of like alternative movement, and it's really draw me there. And also they teach you how to do like adobe house, you know, like earthen building and sustainability, organic farming, and alternative mentality, like having your own community. So I spent there about 2 years.
Nice.
Living in Chiang Mai in this alternative community called Pan Pan.
Okay, Pan, yeah.
Yeah. And during that time, I host a lot of volunteer, like backpacker and people who interested in sustainability, and also like young people who like looking for the new way of living. And then I started to see, it's like, oh, if they could travel, I could travel too. You know, it's like, it doesn't have to be expensive. You could volunteer, you hop around. It's like, okay, that's my thing. So I start to collecting information, starting to collect my like courage to go outside again, you know, but like by myself this time. And so after that, I went to do like woofing. It's like a working, volunteering in organic farm in Europe for 3 months.
Okay.
So I went there to France and working in the like this small garden, and then I also have like a little guest house. And then after that, I traveled a little bit to Spain, Germany. So it's kind of like a little introduction of like a part of Europe. And then I came back and I feel like, oh, I can do it, you know. And so I signed up for another program, like exchange program to go to the US. And this time is more structured. It's like they call the program is like multicultural exchange in sustainable agriculture. It sounds like, sounds like a lot of big words together.
Yeah, that's the US, you know. They like the words very much. It's probably very similar to the Chiang Mai, also the North Highland organization for organic farming, but you know, with more.
But I think this is quite interesting. So I kind of like representing the farm, you know, using the farm. Like, okay, I came from this farm, and I'm gonna represent Thailand. And no one in Thailand knows that this guy representing what, you know. So I was like going to the US, and I think the program focusing on building this network like for international like young farmers, and exchanging the culture of like farming to the US, because it's like it's a very powerful movement, but sometimes they kind of like need to kind of like learn about like what is the roots of like culture of like the agriculture country, like, you know, here Thailand, like Nepal, Sri Lanka, like South America. So they mix all the young farmers together. So it's kind of like building a global movement. I think it's very like ambitious, you know.
Yeah, because it's global or international in nature, and it's about organic and sustainable agriculture, right? Which is, of course, is a big topic of conversation, and it's difficult to really bring it forward meaningfully. I mean, talking about it and organizing things is already a good step.
Yes. So and one good thing is like they ask you to pick a topic of like what you want to focus on this, because it's big, you know, like.
And you, what did you do?
I picked community.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
So basically there is a theme here because you've been, working sort of in communities and moving to communities, and now you are also, specializing in communities in this specific project in the US. So that's a theme that, has been coming through your stories there.
Yeah. I was like, oh, community is interesting because you got a chance to meet many people from different walks of life, and it's kind of like movie, It's like your story, wow, like, oh, your story, whoa, okay, another story, and when it merged together in the same space and this time, it's like, okay, it's kind of, oh, that's why probably I picked to choose, like, to study like filmmaking, because I'm interested in like a story, so kind of more, so I picked a community topic, and then they sent me to this center to work with people with autism and like people with special needs, and it's kind of like a research center, farm, school, and my part is working in the herb like garden, like collecting flower, making tincture, making this and that, and they also using this different like special technique. It's like biodynamics, which is kind of like the way that you farm according to the moon calendar, to the star calendar, and having this preparation that you spread over full moon, over new moon. And,
nice.
It's starting to kind of like bring me to this part of like a new age, like occult science, and like, okay, cool, I like that.
Lots of symbolism behind it, as well as practical agricultural things. Right?
Yes. So it's related to this anthroposophy, like, which is like happened in Germany in the 1900s, and it's like, okay, this is interesting. So after 1 year of like spreading like unknown spray with crystal quartz inside, and then I had to come back here. It's like, okay, what should I do? What should I do with all of this knowledge? And like, it still interests me, and I want to learn more. And how do I continue? And so also this center also related to this special type of school called Waldorf school.
Waldorf, yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's because it's talk about like how human develop, like, how you incarnate, and like spirituality enter this physical body, and how it relate to the universe and everything. So like, wow, big topic.
Fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So you're interested in philosophy as well, is that right?
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's broad enough that it fit all of my interests in there. So like, how can I continue when I come back? So I started to look up, and maybe I work in a school, this type of school. So I researched, and then I saw some meeting of like doctors and like educational parents, and so I joined that, and then I see, oh, this movement is like also starting too. But then it didn't happen. I didn't work at the school, even though they say like, oh, come, we need more like men teacher, and like, like you would be nice, but at the time I didn't go to work in the school. I end up like going to the northeast of Thailand, and then starting my own project, like building like earthen house, making farm, and taking volunteers, becoming a host instead, because of like during that time my partner is kind of like, yeah, why don't you go to work for other people? Why don't you just start your own thing?
Yeah.
And I listened to her.
Oh, okay. Not a good idea.
And then it was good period of experimenting, like becoming a host. Before you were just a guest, you were a volunteer. It was easy. Everybody organized everything for you. Everybody cooks for you, plan for you. You just do what they said. Now you're becoming a host. You just kind of see more like of an overview, and how do you create this space that facilitate people to feel this like community sense and learning at the same time, and also working for you. It's just quite a tricky thing.
Well, for sure, yeah. You need many skills, and organizing people, although it's very lovely in some ways, it presents certain challenges too.
Yes.
Because everybody's a bit different, they got different views of the world, and you have to try to sort of manage them to a certain extent.
Yeah, and also with your partner as well,
Oh, okay. So that's the partner, the relationship dynamic coming in as well, of course.
It's kind of like, okay, everybody live together, they just sleep upstairs, and I sleep here, and then, it's like everybody need their private space. You know, it's time to time that you could share, and but then how do you design that? So it's kind of like a good learning process. So I did that project for about 4 or 5 years, and then later I take a break coming down to the south.
Oh, okay. So that's a new chapter of your life, which is the Koh Phangan chapter.
Yes. So I went to my friend's wedding down south, and then later after the wedding, I came to Koh Phangan, and it was an interesting time again. It was during the military coup. You know, it's like shift. Military government takeover, and there's so many rumors of like people who work without work permit would be caught. They would be super strict, and so you know a lot of like Farang who work here, yoga teachers, kind of like how do I do? You know, they just ran away, get into the forest, or just like escape the country. So during that time, I went to this resort called the Sanctuary.
Yeah, Sanctuary, of course.
Yeah, so I went straight there. I didn't touch this part of the island. I went to the bay.
Okay, so you had a very interesting sort of life up until you moved to Koh Phangan. And, you know, of all places, you found a sanctuary, which is indeed is a very lovely wellness center, yeah? So can you tell us what happened at the sanctuary then?
From working in office, doing the, like, answering emails, and then later they start to move me to assist in this section called the Tea Temple, which is like the alternative healing part of it. And I started involved with the healers and all of the people who have their skills here. And at first I was quite intimidated, like oh, she's gonna like use magic on me or something like that. You know, it was kind of like a little bit tense, and then later I started to feel more relaxed, like okay, working with them. And then later I started to manage like the space.
Okay.
So I managed the program, I managed the space, and I also helped hosting like the open mic nights and
Events and stuff.
so I started to blend in with the community here. People who live here for a long time, 10 years, 20 years, and people who just arrive and teach yoga and want to continue this path of like doing healings and holistic like wellness. And so I started to see like how it goes, like what Koh Phangan have provide, and how it like how the world look at the Koh Phangan, you know, which is kind of like a center, one of the center in the world for like healing, like big on energy healing and wellness and stuff.
Sure, and growing. I mean, it's been growing because, of course, there's only by 5 or 6 wellness centers at the moment, but there are going to be more coming, so they're in the way.
Yeah.
And also, I think that the Shritanu aspect, you know, although it's not as structured as the sanctuary is all in there. It's like one center, very large, everything inside. Whilst here in Shritanu, we have more of a variety of centers, but also freelancers and people coming and going, right? So it's less sort of structured or concentrated, more open. But I agree with you that the fact that, you know, Koh Phangan potentially could become a lot bigger in terms of healing and wellness. Let's hope it does. What do you think?
Yeah, so that's kind of the view of the people who coming here like, internationally. But for Thai people, it's still like it's only full moon that like takes over the whole picture of the island, which is kind of like a little bit of like, you know, yeah, you're missing the point. You know, the island is like not only the party side, which is nothing wrong. You know, it also make the island like growing and thriving because of the party, and it's kind of like bring momentum to the.
And I think the parties brought freedom. Because Koh Phangan is a bit special in some, there's more freedom here than other places in Thailand because of the parties, I think. Because coming, all these revelers coming, doing 3 nights, you know, back-to-back parties, you require a lot of flexibility on the local side. And that's what happened probably.
So at first, you know, at 4 or 5 years, I was in the sanctuary working there and was kind of like in a bubble. You know, when I crossed to this side and saw the full moon thing, I was kind of like, oh, it's too intense. So it's just going back to the bubble. I don't really know what the whole island was about until like the COVID starting to hit, you know. And so I moved into this side, and starting to have more like a local community, like a Thai people who move here and work here, you know, and people are in a different fields of work, you know, like musician, a nurse, construction worker, like noodle seller, something like that. So start to see more like perspective from the people who live here. Apart from, you know, like what I saw at the sanctuary is kind of like alternative healing and like this new age thing happening. So I moved here and then start to, you know, have a lot of free time during COVID, you know, and you hang out a lot and you have time to kind of like study more about like what's happening here, the history, and start to look for books that written by like the local people like 100 years ago and start to imagine of like, okay, how life is like when it was like before the party happened.
And you have books like that, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow, I
and
didn't
it's all
even know.
in Thai, you know.
Ah.
And so I feel like a little bit more superior now. It's like, oh, I've got access to this knowledge, and and but it's all over. But it's just kind of like nobody feel like wanna really archiving this. And
Maybe translate into English as well.
yes, it was kind of like record in a way that it's not like you telling like a fiction. It's kind of like a sonnet. It's kind of like a poem, you know, which is like it's also hard for Thai to kind of like get into that too. But it's kind of like enough for me to kind of like have a glimpse of like what's going on, what's the relationship between like Koh Phangan and Samui and Surat Thani. Before it called Surat Thani, it was kind of like a Chaya and Phun Phin. It's kind of like, you know, other empire of the south, and starting to give me this picture of like, oh, actually like Thailand before it was kind of like a region, and the northern is one region, the northeast one region, and Bangkok is trying to control everything, and the south it also has its own like story and power.
Okay, so now you've been in Koh Phangan for quite a long time, right? And I got to know you because of a specific project that you're part of, right? So from what I saw on the internet, this is a very interesting project because it has some sort of goals or some aims that are very aligned with what I really like as well. So the project is about sort of, you know, contributing to the island in a way that makes the island grow more into a wellness, holistic, spiritual island. Is that correct? And particularly taking some of the Thai roots, because it's a Buddhist center that you are working on, and that involves both local Thais, maybe Bangkok Thais and Thais from other parts of the country, as well as some of the foreigners on the island. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project?
So the center that we plan to build is called Padmakara, and it's the name of this teacher. It's kind of like a root teacher of Vajrayana, and some people call him by the name of Guru Rinpoche.
Okay.
Some people call him in the name of like Padma Sambhava. So he's the one who bring this tantric Buddhism from India and like reintroduce into like Tibet, which has like different contexts of culture, and then it's kind of like make the Buddhism like alive and like flourish again in a new era, and became the like Vajrayana or the tantric Buddhism, which is really hard to kind of like explain what exactly it is, but it's something that we wanted to kind of like grow it on the Thailand like soil, because before we only used to or familiar with this Theravada, the old school, the traditional like practice of like Buddhism, which is like, you know, related like with trying to understand suffering and trying to find ways to get out of that and see the impermanent, and then starting to kind of like escape all this illusion of like samsara and samsaric, like, yeah, something like that is the basic thing, which is also related to Vajrayana. It's kind of like a level that it's linked into each other. But this center was aiming to be in Koh Phangan because we felt the potential during the COVID time of like, okay, the island has communicated to us and communicate to me and communicate to many friends who also practitioner from Bangkok when they visit during COVID time. And we also did a little like a small festival called Sacred Mountain here at the sanctuary about 3-4 years ago. And during that 4-5 days of the festival, we really feel that the island has response to our call or the invitation to have them join and then like showing themselves of like their life like island and also have many things to provide.
Sure.
And so we think that like, okay, if we want to put like a center here, which was like initiated by this foundation called Vajrayana. It's also like trying to expand more understanding of like Vajrayana in Thai like society.
Very interesting. You know, I was in Leh Ladakh in northern India, and I went to a tantric Buddhist temple, which looked very different from the traditional temples there, you know. And the practitioner there was explaining to me that this kind of like tantric sort of, you know, way of experiencing meditation and Buddhism needed to be initiated by a master, and it involves techniques that are more energetic, more esoteric. And you know, this is fascinating because of course I experienced the sort of the tantric aspect of yoga, which is the Indo tradition, and the practitioner there was telling us that there were some parallels between the tantric Hinduism and the tantric Buddhism as well. So I was really fascinated, and we were in this beautiful room, and there were many different statues of Buddha, but they were all covered, so we could not look at them, you know. So, I mean, when it comes to the meditation, because of course I've been to Vipassana, I do transcendental meditation, which is more Hindu style. I experienced maybe 5-7 different types of meditation. In Vajrayana in particular, I mean, what kind of style do you have?
Interesting question. So it's like the teacher taking you to this like space, and I think it's related a lot with like the somatic meditation. I think it's kind of coming back into the space within the body, and also having a lot of visualization of like teacher or of light or of like symbolism, and this would kind of like activate like you going to deeper space and starting to have more relationship with the space within you, and then after that you coming out and you're relating with the outer world, and then you're going back in and out with the instruction, or like when the teacher like interview you of like how is relationship this going, you know, and there will always be like a trigger in life that would kind of like push you into the corners, and how do you surrender to that? How do you stay with this like pain? Like just like similar when you're just sitting, and it's not like always gonna be calm. It's not always gonna be like peaceful, but something would arise. And I think the technique is kind of like learning how to be in this space within first, and it would show up in your body. It will show up in your thoughts, but learning how to surrender to the experience and learning how to engage with it and not trying to escape, but being there. It's like when hell's coming to you, how do you stay as long as you can? And then learning from that, and then you could travel up and down. You don't deny or you don't reject any experience, but you're learning how to build toleration to your own experience, and which is kind of like a little bit hardcore if someone listening to it, but you're learning to transform your view on your own experience, and learning how to face like the light and the shadow and everything, and accepting it, and then trying to bring it back into life, and learning to how to engage, because you're gonna find a lot of things that will sharpen you, will cut some of you out. Ego would be destroyed, and how how do you make your practice like a continue? How do you continue it, without giving up first? So it involves a lot with like relationship with the teacher and the student.
Why did you choose this type of Buddhism versus like Theravada or other styles?
I was ordained once when after I graduate. It's kind of like a time main thing to become a monk once. No matter how long, because it's kind of like, okay, you give a big merit to your family and bring them all to heaven or enlightenment. And that was kind of like an introduction to like the Thai like Theravada, and it's cover all of the basic like knowledge of like Buddhism. But then coming out to real life, it still feels like the Thai Buddhism got used into kind of controlling people under this name of like Buddhism, And so it's kind of like, it's quite tricky for me, like when I hear this word, like Buddhist word, for me I feel like, I don't want to use this word, and feels like I want a more like broad contemporary kind of like a word to use for my own experience. I don't want to relate it to that because I think I have trauma with like, when you close into something, get too close to like maybe you growing up with Christianity or something like that, it's starting to feel like, I wanna...
Yeah, particularly institutionalized religions
yes,
can be a little bit rigid sometimes.
Right.
Let's say that.
Right. So we kind of like, one is like a secular, that like something is separate and it's like personal thing.
Yeah.
It's my choice that I would pick my own spirituality. It's my thing. It's nothing to do with the country or like, institution. It's my own personal path. So that's why, and this one is available at the timing of my life, and it became like, okay, I feel like I don't want to think too much. I don't want to be questioned of anything. I just feel like I value this meeting between me and my teacher. I value this like circumstance that happening, and then it feels like, okay, I wanted to commit to this, which is hard. I spent like decades to kind of like looking for teacher, looking for the right. And then I look at this, it's like, it stays, it never leaves, this connection, the bond is there, and I don't have to think about it, I don't have to argue, I don't have to use my intellectual mind to kind of like coming to this. I feel this connection right away, and it's keep more growing, more intense, and I feel like, okay, having a center here will develop this relationship to be another level too, and it would kind of like creating your own temple, which is everywhere here in Thailand. You see temple everywhere, but this would be my temple at this time, a contemporary temple that run by not monks, but just a practitioner. But also we got support by the lineage of our teacher and how to work with this culture that already exists here on the island, the spirituality. Everybody is looking for something, and we kind of like put all of our resource, our practice, and when it's become like a center like this, I could draw more of like people from Bangkok or friends like, okay, we have a center now. So everybody bring this momentum, and when it's kind of like more local, it would be interesting to see how it affects the island now, which is kind of like, the thing on this side of spirituality was driven by like the foreigner, and if something that run by by us, by the local Thai or someone who are closing to this place, it doesn't have to mean that you have to be certain nationality, but the connection with the land, the history, the approach, the how you culture, race here. I'm just curious how it's gonna.
I think it's great. I think it's very much needed, to be honest with you. I think it would be a great addition to the island to have something which is Thai, because I think one of the problems that we have, it's something that I think is going to solve itself over the years, but the community, the way I see it, is very, very foreign. So there are many foreigners and very beautiful people from all over the world, from Israel, America, Australia, France. And we have some Thai people coming into the community, people that maybe, are struggling with the existential problem of living, of life, like a bigger question, a big philosophical and existential question. Why do I live? What should I be doing? Listening to your story, it seems like you are exactly very similar to me and some other friends that we have, international people, that also think, well, there's maybe more than just working 8 hours a day in a job. I want to discover myself. I want to discover the land that I'm from. I want to discover, sort of the symbols that guide my existence, And I think it's lovely if you can do this, and then you can have, the Thai people and then some of the foreigners, and there could be a very nice center. And this type of Buddhism is more flexible in some ways, right? So it would be more appealing to a certain type of person that is more sort of self-empowered. Is that right?
So the center would experiment a lot of things. It would be for the people who want to deepening their practice. So we want to kind of like shift it beyond just the activity or just a session, but becoming something that you have to commit more of, like opening yourself and getting to a deeper. And it's also like a devotion. You need to offer something before you get something. And it's tricky, this relationship between teacher and student, because this time is like a lot of controversy about like becoming a cult or something like that. Which is, yes, it's tricky and it's personal, it's like people can criticize, like, okay, they are abusing the relationship, but when you have your own direct experience, you could learn. Sometimes it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be soft and gentle, but this is like, if it's like worth it, you dive into it. It's just kind of like building this courage and this pride of like you bold enough to kind of like, trade, exchange, commit, and invest. So the center would kind of like, okay, you shifting your you want to deepening. You study more, so there would be like a resource there, like a library, or like people who would be a meditation instructor, and we would have like a place that we would meet for local and also like the international community to meet, kind of like exchanging, what we find, and it's kind of like our talk right now. And maybe the teaching in the evening. So we don't know yet how it's gonna look like, but it's just kind of like we're gonna start with some intention now. And then later, when the physical like building happening, it will slowly kind of create. We have done this before in Bangkok, but the different in Bangkok is like it's in the city, and you cannot relate that clear with the physical landscape, like natural world, like Koh Phangan, because Koh Phangan, that like every beach, every place, it has different personality.
Sure, so it's such a beautiful island.
Yeah.
And you have some land already? I mean, I saw some photos. So the land is there, is that right?
Yes, the foundation has bought the land last year. It's near the Pang waterfall. The national park area. So it have this like very humid and like kind of fresh energy from the waterfalls, and it's in a local community area, and the Pang waterfall there, like the local community has lived there for a long time, and it had this road straight coming to Chalok Lam and going to the ocean. So it's kind of like the axis here, and it's kind of like connecting to the core of the island.
Yes, because it's in the center of the island. That's lovely. So you're looking to fundraise now, is that right?
Yes.
So what kind of initiatives you're doing? Of course, you are linked to this foundation or this organization in Bangkok, so that gives you some advantages already in terms of legitimacy and etc. But then you need also to raise some money to actually build. So what's the plan?
So this year we plan to do the fundraise, and our budget is like about 13 million baht, which is kind of like, I don't think it's that much, to build something for with these big ideas, and it's just 2 buildings. One is the shrine room for practice, and there would be like a common room to kind of like meet and maybe have like a dining area together, an open kitchen. And another building is the dormitory and library and activity room or like a small interview room, a little bit of like a hanging out area. So just two building, and we already have an architect from Chiang Mai, which is like they volunteer to come down, and this architecture studio known for like they're trying to be the voice of the land instead of working for the people who hired them. So they connecting with the land, or they talk to the people around the land, and then they walk over and they study kind of idea of this like Vajrayana, and then it became this building. And we could show you this like design like in the website, and I could explain more. So it would involve many people, like in different career path, and in the future this would be a retreat place for all of these people who join in the project. And so this year we will do the fundraise, and when we finish the fundraise this year, next year would gonna be the construction part.
Wow, it's fascinating, Well, Chanin, thank you very much, for coming to Chalaklom today and explaining first of all your life story, which is fascinating, very interesting, and also your project. And I didn't know you were working at a sanctuary, so you have such a diverse background of experiences that I think makes you a perfect guy for building this kind of center, because it's like East meets West, literally, right? Because you're from Bangkok, Chinese, so many things coming together. And I love to be able to experience some of the practices that you're also going to be teaching. So I hope we can keep in touch, and if we can support you for the fundraising whenever you're doing something specific, you have a date or something, please let us know. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. Okay.
ขอบคุณครับ
Kapun kap.